Hi, I'm Pam Fox at pamfox.org, and I'm streaming live on YouTube in the Plantar Reflux Facebook group. Hi, everybody. If you're here for the first time and you'd like to do the 28-day anti-reflux plant-based challenge, you can do a couple of things. You can join us in the group. You go to Facebook and request to join. It's called Plantar Reflux Support Group with Pam Fox. I try to go in every 24 hours and approve those requests. Or you can buy my new book, Plantar Reflux, on Amazon, and take the challenge with us. So today we're going to be talking, first of all, I'm going to make, from the cookbook, I'm going to be making hot date, which is a wonderful, wonderful recipe. And I've been really looking forward to sharing this recipe with you guys. And the reason I haven't is because it's more of a, it's something I drink a lot in the winter, the hot date, because it's a very hot and rich, energizing beverage, but I drink it a lot in the summer as well. I just make it a cold date. So I know in the cookbook it's called the hot date because it's kind of a nice play on words. But I'm going to go ahead and make that for you now, and I'm going to do the cold version. And there's nothing to it. It's basically dates and water. Now the recipe calls for, I think some, I can't remember what I put in there, chia seed or flax seed or hemp seed. I can't remember. Probably hemp seed. Let me look it up really quick. I just keep all that stuff on hand, and when I'm making my smoothies, I try to throw some kind of nut or seed in all of my smoothies. So the hot date has a teaspoon of cinnamon, and of course you can leave that out if you want to, but in the wintertime it's great with the cinnamony and the sweetness. Now, is this a hyper sweet beverage? Yeah, it is, and you can temper that by adding a little more water, or you could add some plant-based. What I have here are some dates that I just get from my, I just poured some water over them because they were kind of stale, but I think I've got 6 in there. I'm going to do one more. I've got a new, normally when I buy these at my co-op, they're, you know, you just put them in a paper bag and take them home, but they're not letting us do that now. They're pre-packaging them in these little containers, which I don't like, but that's the way it is for now. But I'm just going to blend this up just like this. Give me 1 second, just to show you guys, just with, where's my lid? Hang on. Just with dates and water, how creamy this could be. To add the water. Oh my goodness. So I just got, I'm going to be putting this in this mason jar, so I've already got some water in here. Whoops. And I'm going to put, because this is a cold date, I'm going to put some ice cubes in to make it cold instead of hot. So we'll just do, probably 3 is fine. Okay, it's loud. Here we go. Or cinnamon or seeds or anything like that. I just want to show you what you get with this. You get a really kind of a, you can't really see that. It almost looks white like milk. Really kind of a rich, creamy. Now this is a very liquidy beverage. And it's perfect. I love it just like that. Because it's not too sweet. Now if I were to add more dates to this, the first time I ever made kind of a date beverage like this, I put in a lot of dates, not very much water. It was really thick and syrupy, and I couldn't even drink it. I was like, that's disgusting. So this is the way I like it, more like a beverage. And I'm not even going to add, so I could add a little bit of milk to that if I wanted to. I could add some nuts or seeds. I could add some soy powder to that to make it like creamier. But I love it just like this. We're just going to leave it like that. And hang on. And the thing about dates is they're so rich in nutrients. But the thing I love about them, I'm going on a very long bike ride. I'm getting ready to leave here in the next hour. And it's a wonderful, wonderful source of energy, like better than coffee. Like with coffee, excuse the street noise, it's going to be hot today, so I've got my windows open. With coffee, you know, I get a buzz from that. I get an instant kick, I get a high. I don't drink coffee anymore. If I'm going to have a big workout, a long workout, an endurance workout, something challenging, this is what I make sure and consume, because it really sets me up for success in terms of having enough energy. If I know I'm going to have a really long day, and I'm not going to get home till late, a lot of meetings or something like that, I will make sure to get some dates in. And of course, you can just eat dates. You can just eat them if you want. I've just never been a really big fan of dates. I know some people love them. They're just super sweet. They're so sweet. And the other nice thing about this, again, you can do it in the winter and add in your cinnamon and make it very just festive and hot and soothing for winter. But you can really experiment with this too. I mean, this is like a sweet base. So if you wanted to experiment with some different things and kind of go out on your own with this as a foundation, you can do that as well. I've experimented quite a bit with this, and this is what I love. I love the dates and the water. Again, I usually throw in a tablespoon of hemp seeds that I keep in my freezer, or a couple of nuts. I usually throw in some kind of a fat, throw that in there. It just kind of balances it out, and it does give it a little bit more of that nutty, rich flavor. That's kind of nice. But as far as just getting in this energy and getting in these nutrients for a day that's going to be a little bit more challenging, this is great. This is great. So, all right. So today we're going to be talking about, we're going into chapter 8, entitled "How Does My Microbiome Factor In?" And so I dedicated a whole chapter to this, and I just tried my best to explain it as best I could. When it comes to the microbiome, it's new science. I mean, it's not brand new, but there are studies in place right now, long-term studies that we don't have the conclusions to. There have been some studies conducted. We do know some things about the gut microbiome, but what seems to happen with these burgeoning sciences is when you start to learn more about them, it just creates more and more questions. And so we'll kind of go through what I've learned about the gut microbiome and what I think is important for all of us to know based on what we do know. So one of the things that we know for certain about the gut microbiome is that when they see diversified, you probably heard this before, diversified gut microbiota, and how important that is for health. So when we look at two different gut microbiomes, one being highly diversified, one not, what you see in the individuals with a highly diversified gut microbiome is you see a stronger immunity, less inflammation, and better health. And what you see in a less diversified gut microbiome is weakened immunity and, of course, more disease. So when we hear that, we think, well, I need to strengthen my gut microbiome, right? How do I strengthen my gut microbiome? And so the first thing is to understand is, how did it get weak in the first place? Or how might it have gotten weak in the first place? And we know some of the answers to that question. One has to do with diet, okay? So a lot of people, when they hear this new science about the gut microbiota and how we need to have more diversity in healthy bacteria, they go out and they buy a probiotic, right? Which makes sense. We need to introduce more healthy bacteria into the gut by taking a pill in the form of a probiotic, which has healthy bacteria in it. And for some people, that's really beneficial and it really helps. And for others, they don't notice much difference, or they even say it makes them feel sicker. So what I want to say about that is a great example that I heard years ago about treating a problem, basically. When you have a problem in life, you can, go about throwing things on top of it to try to treat that problem, resolve that problem, and avoid the very thing that caused the problem in the first place, right? So the example is, if you come home at the end of the day and your bathroom is flooded, right? Maybe someone left the faucet on and the sink was plugged and it overflowed and it's flooded. and your first response is to grab a bunch of towels and start mopping up all that water, you've avoided the very important first response. What should have been is turning off the water, right? Because you can continue to mop up all that water, but you've still got water coming in. You've still got what caused the problem in the first place. So when it comes to undiversified gut microbiome, which basically means you have fewer of these strains and species of healthy bacteria in your gut than you should. It's that diversification of lots of different strains and species is what creates strong immunity. And so we need to have that diversification. Just like when you come to America, you have a diversification in ethnicity, and it makes us a stronger, well, it's supposed to make us a stronger country as long as we're united. But it's the same thing in the gut. When you have that diversity, you have a stronger immunity. When you don't, you have a weakened immunity. And you're lacking those checks and balances where some of the pathogenic bacteria then can flourish without that diversification. So the bad guys can kind of rise to strength within the gut when you don't have those healthy bacteria kind of keeping everything in check. So then, why then do people have a undiverse gut microbiome? So I'm going to talk about a couple of the reasons, or the things that we know. One is diet. So again, going back to how do I solve a problem? If you just take that pill, you take that probiotic, but you avoid what you're eating, you're not looking at your diet, which we've been kind of conditioned to do, right? This is what we do. We feel sick, we feel uncomfortable, we have pain, we go to the doctor, they give us a pill. That's just kind of what we've been conditioned to do. We want that pill, we want that treatment, we want that fast, results. We want it to be fixed. Stop and take a look at maybe what I'm doing that's causing the problem. It takes effort, it takes intelligence, it takes trial and error, it takes, it might take some failures before we figure it out. It can be frustrating, and it can be slow. And so we want that quick fix. But diet is very important. We have to take a look at our diet. And so the connection between food and the microbiome is very, very clear. A high fiber diet, which a plant-based diet is by default because plants are filled with fiber. They are fibrous foods. And that's the only place we get fiber in our diets is in our plants, right? There's no fiber in meat, dairy, and eggs. So the fiber comes from the plant foods. So a high fiber diet is what is going to stimulate and keep those good healthy bacteria strong. So that's the first thing you understand. And we're going to talk in a minute about how to re-diversify, but we have to understand what keeps the bacteria, the good healthy bacteria that already exist in our gut. How do we keep those strong and flourishing? How do we keep them strong? And it's through fiber. Those healthy immune system or disease-fighting bacteria, they love fiber. So all of our different bacteria, they feed on different fuels, right? And so if you're eating a diet that's filled with a lot of junk food, there's going to be certain bacteria that love that junk food, and they're going to thrive. If you're eating a lot of plant food and a lot of fiber, those bacteria that love that fuel are going to flourish, and they're going to thrive. The bacteria that love meat, dairy, and eggs, if you eat a lot of meat, dairy, and eggs, those bacteria are going to flourish and they're going to thrive. And it's the bacteria that love the fibrous foods. Those are the healthy bacteria. We're going to talk about that. Those are the bacteria that do a couple of things in the body. I guess we'll talk about that right now. We'll move on to that. But before we move on, just keep that in mind, that your diet is rich in fiber, and it promotes the bacteria that strengthen your immunity and fight disease. So here's a couple of ways they do that. One is through the production or the increased production of what's known as short chain fatty acids. So your body produces these so-called short chain fatty acids, and they're responsible for a variety of things. And I have a list here in the chapter. Short chain fatty acids are responsible for regulating hunger hormones, normalizing pH, increasing iron absorption, decreasing pathogenic growth, increasing butyrate production, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a second, improving motility or intestinal transit, which is regularity. And if you've ever heard the saying, all disease starts in the gut, this is it. It's if you can improve that regularity, which is that transit time of things, moving through at the rate that they're supposed to move through, this can remedy a lot of your digestive issues or even beyond, right? Just having that good digestion, good regularity, right? Where you're having a bowel movement every single day or even multiple times a day. You don't want that stuff sitting around in your body. I mean, let's face it, it's crap. You don't want it sitting around in your body for long periods of time. All right, so let's go back to this short chain fatty acids. So think about it. If you on a high fiber diet, you're going to increase production of short chain fatty acids, which is going to result in what? It's going to result in regulating your hunger hormones. How would that impact your life if you could have optimally working regulation of your hunger hormones? It's going to normalize pH. Now your body is always striving to maintain the perfect pH, and it will do so. And if it doesn't, you could die. So it will do so, but it has to work really hard to do that sometimes. And with the increase of the short chain fatty acid production, it can kind of sit back and the body is in balance without having to work so hard at it. Increased iron absorption. Imagine how your life would change if your body was better absorbing iron. Decreasing pathogenic growth. So pathogens, again, are things like viruses and bacteria and parasites, the things that are trying to break you down, right? The things that are trying to eat you alive, to kill you. And so if you can have decreased pathogenic growth, or at least something to keep that in check so it doesn't, overpopulate and take over to the point where you have disease, that would be a good thing, right? And then we talked about improving motility and then increase of butyrate production. So butyrate, I go through butyrate a couple of paragraphs here, but just to sum it up, butyrate itself is responsible for also optimizing that rate or that transit rate or regularity. So, and it's also, they're also finding that butyrate is one of the things. So when they look at people who have been on plant-based diets for a significant period of time, maybe a couple years or 5 years, guess what? They don't find any colorectal cancer. So, and this is what they connect it to, is this higher levels of butyrate in the gut. And so you have higher levels of butyrate, you're at lower risk for especially colorectal cancer. So, so those are just some things to consider, but really the point I want to make is when you're on a plant-based diet, you're on a high fiber diet. When you're on a high fiber diet, you're feeding those healthy bacteria and you're helping them to be, you're helping those colonies to be strong. You're helping those species and those strains that love fiber to be strong and capable and doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. So let's move on and talk more about, again, going back to gut diversity. Yeah, we want to have healthy, strong, beneficial bacteria, but we also want to have multiple strains and species. So why do some people not? Why do some just have very few species and others have this diversification? Well, there's a couple of reasons, and probably the most significant that we know of today and the most obvious is the uptake in antibiotics. So most people, the vast majority of people, have been on an antibiotic at some point in their life. I know some people haven't, but the vast majority of people have been on an antibiotic or multiple antibiotics, and this can really wreak havoc because the whole point of antibiotics is to wipe out bacteria, and it's not going to distinguish the good from the bad, right? So if you have an infection, yeah, it's going to wipe out those infectious bad bacteria, but it's going to take out some of the good guys with it, okay, which is unfortunate. It can save your life, and that's good, but there can be that side effect. And so then how do we put those healthy bacteria back in? And again, one thing you can try is a probiotic. That's one way. The thing you need to know about recolonizing healthy bacteria, one of the things that they're finding with all of the research that's being done is that these probiotics, or even implementing eating more fermented foods, they really do their work on their way through. In other words, they don't necessarily go into the body and start procreating and setting up camp or recolonizing to the point where now, I'm taking these probiotics, I'm eating these probiotics, and now I've recolonized and rediversified my gut microbiome. It doesn't always happen that simply. They do their work going through, so they're beneficial on their way through. And so what we learned from that is that if you're taking a probiotic and you're finding it beneficial, you might have to keep taking it not for the rest of your life, but you may have to take it for months or even years before they really start to like set up camp and start to recolonize and stay put where they're at, instead of just doing that beneficial work on their way through. And the same goes for fermented foods. They oftentimes do their work on their way through. And that's why it's so important to, if you're going, and we'll talk more about fermented foods as they relate to reflux, because we've talked about that before, but I will mention that again. But if you are incorporating fermented foods, it's really important that you're incorporating them consistently, right? Which means daily. So you don't just want to eat a bunch of sauerkraut once a week or once a month and think you're incorporating fermented foods. They do their work on the way through, so you need to eat them daily. So if you want to avoid, taking probiotics, or maybe you've tried them before and didn't notice that they were helpful at all, or maybe they made you feel worse, try fermented foods. And what you want to do is eat them every day. Now, if you do have LPR, and we've talked about this before, if you do have LPR, which is reflux that comes up to the upper esophagus and can cause symptoms such as a clearing of the throat, a sore throat, a lump in your throat, difficulty swallowing, these different kinds of things, then you should be avoiding fermented foods because they are acidic in nature. And you should be on a denaturing protocol, which means we talked about that, where you're drinking some alkaline water between breakfast and lunch, between lunch and dinner every day, just little sips. And it's that consistency that's going to denature and minimize any pepsin that may be present in your throat. So you need to eliminate acidic foods and have a denaturing protocol if you have LPR. And you need to be patient, and you need to commit to it. If you don't have LPR, maybe you just have GERD, which is, the heartburn down low, maybe some occasional regurgitation, but it's not to the point where your throat is always raw and sensitive and that kind of a thing. Then you may be able to tolerate some fermented foods. Now, I wouldn't do something like kimchi because it's got a lot of, acidic spices in it. It's spicy. Sauerkraut may be okay. My best recommendation is plain yogurt or water kefir. And you can make either of those very affordably, or you can buy them very expensively. Oh, that's good to know, Suzanne. That's good to know. She says the alkaline water is helping her chronic cough. Yeah, stick with it, be consistent, and be patient, because when it comes to the pepsin, you may have reoccurring influx or reflux of pepsin, and it's a very stubborn protein or enzyme. And so it can take a little time to denature and rid the body of that. And plus, again, you may be having recurrent reflux where it's just putting it back in. You're getting rid of it and it's putting it back in. So you kind of have to really attack that pepsin. But anyway, getting back to the yogurt and the kefir, making your own plain yogurt is very affordable. It's inexpensive. And the point isn't, you're not going to just, eat a whole bunch of it. That's not the point. You want to eat a couple of spoonfuls every morning. Again, so you're introducing those healthy bacteria, those probiotics, and allowing them to do that daily work. You could do it first thing in the morning and then again at night. You need to decide for yourself, or figure out for yourself what's going to work. You may only need a couple of bites, every morning. That may be sufficient. If you're not noticing much after a couple of weeks, try it, a couple times a day. See how you tolerate that, if it's bothering your throat at all. The thing about plain yogurt is it's not very acidic, but it is rich in probiotics. Okay, so that's a safe one. And then water kefir, which you make with filtered water. I've got a batch going right here. I don't know if you can see that little bubbles rising in there, but these are the grains down here, and you can order those online. And you just fill water and a couple tablespoons of sugar, and the grains ferment the sugar. When you actually drink it, it's not sweet. There's no sugar in it, but the grains produce healthy bacteria, and so you drink 4 to 6 ounces of that every day. And I like to experiment with my water kefir and flavor it in different ways. But if for someone that's really trying to fight reflux, which I don't do anymore, so I can get away with all these things, but I might flavor it with. I like to flavor it with different juice blends. I'll put a little bit of juice in there, or different purees, or whatever. So those are my recommendations for 2 safe probiotics. Again, they do their work on the way through, so you want to be consistent and really commit to having couple spoonfuls of yogurt every day, or 4 to 6 ounces of your kefir every day. And you want to stay away from, again, if you've got LPR and you're trying to eliminate acidic foods, you want to stay away from things like kombucha. Kombucha is great. It's rich in probiotics. Well, certain brands are, but again, it's highly acidic. And so if you have some of these issues with reflux, particularly LPR, you want to avoid kombucha. So, all right. So I go on to mention, okay, just to summarize before I go on. So 1, plant-based diet to strengthen your good, healthy bacteria because it's rich in fiber. And 2 is to reintroduce healthy bacteria through plain yogurt and water kefir. Now, I go on to talk a little bit about, so that's with the antibiotics. The other thing is, some of the chemicals that are in our diet. So, if you're not eating organic, and the glyphosate, and I did put a blog post link by Chris Kresser that I think is really good about glyphosate. And Chris Kresser is not even a plant-based eater, and I purposefully put him in here because all of my resources are from plant-based doctors in the book. So I purposely put this guy in here, but it's a really good, non-biased, well-written blog post about glyphosate and the impact of these chemicals on our food. And so it's my opinion that you should be eating organic wherever you can. Eat organic wherever you can. And if you can't, and I understand, I don't eat 100% organic, but I sure wash my food if it's not organic. I wash it with some lemon water or with a very diluted borax and water solution, or you can buy like the rinses. I mean, I've never used any of those, the produce rinses, or you can just wash with rinse and repeat with water a couple of times. Like in a salad spinner, whether you're washing your cherries or your berries or whatever, if they're not organic, you really want to get into the habit of washing that stuff and getting as much of that residue off as possible, because these chemicals they're finding are a culprit as well in really wiping out some of that healthy bacteria in the gut. And that makes sense. I mean, these are chemicals that are meant to kill. They're meant to kill. They're meant to kill bugs. They're meant to kill viruses and bacteria, out in the crops. So, if those residues are on the food that you're eating, they're going in, and the gut lining is getting exposed to that. And that's the next thing I talk about is the gut lining and how important it is to understand that gut lining. Your stomach has a protective lining, but your intestines as well have a protective lining, right? And so the integrity of that lining is so important. And going back to really everything that we're talking about, including the short chain fatty acids and the butyrate, particularly the butyrate. I talked about anti-cancer functions, but their butyrate is also responsible for really maintaining that integrity of the lining of the intestinal tract. And so we have this thin, fragile lining of the intestinal tract that can be broken down if you have, again, weak butyrate production, lots of chemicals in your diet. And so what happens when that lining breaks down? Well, now elements from your food that are supposed to stay, in certain places until they're, meant to be absorbed, those nutrients, water that uses all those things in your food. But if you have those things leaking out elsewhere into your bloodstream and being delivered to different places in your body, then your body can detect those as foreign bodies and then invade, right? So when I was a little kid, I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and I was told by my rheumatologist that my immune system was basically broken. And I believed this my entire life. Now we know better. We know otherwise. Your immune system, when you have an autoimmune disease, your immune system is not broken. You have elements in places of your body that don't belong there because they have escaped through a weakened barrier in your intestinal wall, that intestinal lining. They've escaped, they've passed through that into the bloodstream, and the bloodstream has delivered that wherever and dropped them off, in the case of arthritis, into the joints. The body detects these foreign invaders and it attacks the joints. And so I was told as a child, your immune system is broken and it's attacking healthy cells. Well, that's bad news. Why is my immune system broken? And I feel very fortunate because I actually grew up during a time where immune weren't all the rage yet. They were still studying them. They were in, I was a part of a drug study, but it wasn't it wasn't an immune suppressant. It was just a type of an anti-inflammatory. But immune suppressants are just going to suppress your immune system so that your body is less able to attack those so-called healthy cells. And while the body does attack those healthy, like the joints, for example, it's really attacking those foreign invaders that have escaped the intestines, right? And gone into places where they don't belong, like a protein or other substances. So I talk a little bit about this. They talk about the integrity of the gut lining, which is crucial to good health. It prevents bacteria. Okay. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap that up. That's a little bit for you to think about. Just a little bit of a recap. One, eating a plant-based diet is rich in fiber. You get all of your fiber from plant foods, right? There's no fiber in meat, dairy, and eggs. It's only in the plants. So these dates, for example, are rich in fiber. And this is going to support good, healthy bacteria in your gut, which is your immunity, by the way. And then as far as recolonizing and encouraging, reproduction of good, healthy bacteria, we've got to put that back in. We've got to put that back in because it's been decimated either by your diet, by medication use, or antibiotic use, or toxins and chemicals that one way or the other. It could be cigarettes, it could be junk food, it could be, and then, and not to mention antibiotics. If you've never taken an antibiotic, but you eat a lot of meat, you've taken antibiotics because the animals are given antibiotics, and so there's residue of those antibiotics when then you eat their flesh. So yeah, you've got to reintroduce those good, healthy bacteria. That can be done with a probiotic, and it can be done with fermented foods. And I suggest plain yogurt or water kefir every day, every single day. You've got to commit to every day. So whether you have something on your counter or maybe a big jug of the yogurt, and you can get plant-based yogurts, which is what I recommend, a plant-based yogurt. Just get like a big container of the plain yogurt, a couple of bites every day. If you think it's disgusting, plug your nose and just get it down. Or you can mix it with fruit. If you really want to turn it into like a side dish for your breakfast, mix it with some chopped fruit, banana, whatever. But yeah, you want to reintroduce those healthy bacteria. And you want to be patient because, again, they do their work going through and they're not quick to procreate, reestablish, recolonize within the gut. So it may take months, it may take years. It's going to be different for everybody. But eating a plant-based diet is going to be helpful in recolonizing those bacteria because plant foods are prebiotics. In other words, plant foods is what feeds healthy bacteria. So you want to be eating plenty of plant foods, incorporating probiotic rich foods, and you can try a probiotic as well. So all right, so I'm gonna hit the road on my bike ride. I want to show you guys this. I went for a really long bike ride yesterday and my butt is really sore. So I had one of those little kneeling pads for in your garden, and this is like the handle of it, and I cut it off and I'm gonna tape it to my bike because my tailbone is really sore. I have one of those really hard bike seats. So I thought maybe this would be like a butt pillow, like a butt donut. I'll let you know how that goes. Maybe I could like patent this and become a millionaire. So, all right, thank you so much for watching and have a lovely, lovely day.